There was a silence that hung in the air as Jesus spoke on the hillside, the wind carrying his words like fire through the hearts of those who listened. The sun was beginning to set behind the distant mountains, casting a warm glow across the faces of the people gathered there. They had come to hear him speak of life, truth, and the mysteries of heaven, and as he looked out at them, his voice softened. "Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice," he said, "is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." His voice faded into the hush of the crowd, and for a long moment no one spoke. The story was simple, but its meaning was eternal. Far from that hillside, in a quiet valley near the Sea of Galilee, two men once lived who embodied this very story. Their names were Eliab and Laban. Both were builders by trade, both skilled with their hands and ambitious with their dreams. Yet they could not have been more different in spirit. Eliab was patient, deliberate, and humble, a man who believed that what was unseen mattered more than what was seen. Laban, on the other hand, was proud and clever, eager for results, quick to show others his work, and quicker still to take shortcuts. When they decided to build homes for their families, their choices would reveal who they truly were. Eliab chose a piece of land near the rocky hillside. The ground was hard, stubborn, and unyielding, but he knew that beneath that soil lay solid stone. Every morning he rose before dawn, took his tools, and began to dig. The days were long, and the sun was merciless. His hands blistered and bled, his back ached, and progress came slowly. Villagers passing by would shake their heads, wondering why he worked so hard when there was easier land down by the river. But Eliab would smile and say quietly to himself, "A house is only as strong as what it stands on." Laban chose the riverbank. The soil was soft and smooth, easy to shape, and his foundation took days instead of weeks. He built quickly, and in a short time his house stood tall and bright. It was beautiful, polished wood, shining windows, a view of the water that glimmered in the sunlight. People admired it and praised him for his skill. Laban basked in their compliments. He often looked up toward the hill where Eliab still struggled, shaking his head with amusement. "Why waste your life digging into rock," he laughed, "when the sand will hold just as well?" Eliab said nothing. He simply kept working, layer after layer, stone after stone. Months later, when his home was finally finished, it wasn't as elegant as Laban's. The walls were rough, the windows small, but there was a quiet strength in it, a peace that only he could feel. He had built not for appearance, but for endurance. Then one night, the skies turned dark. The wind began to howl across the valley, bending trees and shaking doors. The first drops of rain fell, and then the heavens opened. It was a storm like none they had ever seen. Lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled like the voice of God himself. The river rose quickly, roaring and hungry, its water climbing up the banks, swallowing the sand. In the flickering light, Laban stood at his window, watching in horror as the water crept closer to his doorstep. He tried to move his belongings higher, but the floorboards began to tremble. The sand beneath his home shifted, the walls groaned, and before he could even cry out, the entire house collapsed with a deafening crash, vanishing into the flood. Everything he had built was gone in an instant. High on the hill, Eliab's home stood firm. The wind lashed at it, the rain beat against the roof, but the foundation beneath the stone did not move. Inside, Eliab lit a small lamp and sat near the wall, listening to the storm rage outside. His heart was heavy for Laban, for he had warned him many times, but he also felt a deep peace, a peace born not from the absence of the storm, but from the strength beneath his feet. When morning came and the sun rose over the valley, Eliab stepped outside. The world was quiet again, the air clean and still. Down by the river, nothing remained of Laban's home but shattered wood and drifting debris. Eliab bowed his head, whispering softly, "The rock has held." Years later, people would still tell their children about the two builders, the one who built on sand and the one who built on stone. And every time the rains came, they would remember. The story became more than a lesson about houses. It became a reflection of life itself. Because we are all builders. Every decision, every word, every choice we make is a brick in the structure of our lives. Some build on comfort, success, pride, or wealth, foundations that shift with time. Others build on faith, truth, and love, things that no storm can destroy. In another time, far from Galilee, there was a man named Daniel. He lived in a modern city, far removed from shepherds and stone walls, yet his life followed the same pattern. Daniel was successful, ambitious, and respected. He had everything he thought he wanted: a good job, a beautiful apartment, a full social life. He worked long hours and spent his money freely. But deep down, he felt a quiet emptiness, a sense that all he had built was somehow fragile. Then, without warning, his company went bankrupt. Within a month, he lost his job, his savings, and his confidence. His friends drifted away. The world that once seemed so stable suddenly crumbled like sand beneath his feet.
One evening, while cleaning his small apartment, Daniel found an old Bible that had belonged to his mother. It was covered in dust, its pages yellowed and worn. He sat down and opened it randomly. His eyes fell on a verse from the Gospel of Matthew. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. He read the words again and again, and something in him broke. He realized that all his life he had been building on sand, on success, approval, and self-reliance. But none of it could stand against the storm. For the first time in years, he prayed. "God," he whispered, "I don't know how to rebuild, but I want to build on you." That night marked the beginning of a quiet transformation. Daniel didn't become rich again. He didn't suddenly find all the answers, but he began to rebuild differently. He forgave those who had hurt him. He reached out to help others who had lost their way. He learned to be grateful for what he still had, rather than bitter for what he had lost. He started each day with prayer, trusting that even if the world shook again, his heart would stand firm. Slowly, the emptiness faded. It was replaced by something far stronger: peace. Not the peace that comes from an easy life, but the peace that comes from knowing your foundation cannot be taken away. That is what the parable means. It is not a story about construction, it is a story about conviction. It teaches that the strength of a life is not measured by its beauty or its comfort, but by its foundation. When the sun shines, sand and stone look the same. But when the rain falls, the difference is everything. Storms will come for all of us: betrayal, loss, disappointment, failure. They test what we stand on. And in those moments, what truly matters is not how high we've built, but how deep we've dug. The rock that Jesus spoke of is not wealth, nor religion, nor success. It is truth. It is faith. It is the quiet, unshakable trust that even when the world collapses, God remains. The wise builder is not the one who avoids storms, but the one who prepares for them. The foolish builder is not evil, just careless, content to live for today without thinking of tomorrow. But the storms will always come. They come to reveal, not to destroy. And those who build on the rock will not fall, not because they are strong, but because the one they stand on is. The years passed, and the story of Eliab and Laban became legend. Children would play near the ruins of the riverbank house, their parents pointing to the hillside where the old stone home still stood, weathered but firm. They would say, "See that? That's what it means to build on the rock." And in the quiet evenings, when storms rolled through the valley again, people would gather around their fires, whispering prayers that their hearts would be as strong as that house on the hill. Even today, the same truth stands. The storm may take everything you have, but it cannot take who you are when you stand on what is eternal. You can lose the roof, the walls, the comfort, but if your heart is anchored to the rock, you will rise again. And that rock is not just faith, it is a person. It is Jesus, the foundation that never crumbles. So build deep, build steady, build on something that cannot be washed away, because the rain will fall, the rivers will rise, and the winds will blow. That much is certain. But if your foundation is strong, when the storm passes and the sunlight returns, you will still be standing. And you will look up at the sky, wipe the rain from your face, and whisper, "The rock has held."